Over 100 years ago, Iowa faced one of its most heinous murders. That's right, today we are discussing the Villisca Axe Murders. Sophia and I are pleased to welcome Cadence back to take a deep dive into this case. From the mistreatment of evidence to the many suspects, join us in our Morbid Time Machine and let's get into it.
Welcome inquirers, new and old. Have you ever wanted to go down a rabbit hole of morbid history, but you don't know where to start?
Then you are in the right place. Our Grim Past is a podcast where each week we explore messed up history.
From shipwrecks and spooky places to morally questionable people and practices, we're Sophia
and Maia.
Join us in our Morbid Time Machine
and let's discuss history's most fucked up. Hello everybody, welcome back to Our Grim Past. Today we are with Cadence.
Hi.
Yay! I'm so excited to have another guest speaker.
Round of applause.
Second guest speaker moment.
Yes!
Today, living for it. I'm really, oh my god, man. I'm really excited for today's episode because it's a homegrown event right here in Iowa.
Right here in Iowa.
Since this is a murder house, second time, I'm loving the murder house theme.
Cadence.
Make it a theme. Yeah, I love it. I think it's interesting when doing, when looking at their website and stuff, which will be linked, you can stay there.
Yeah.
Which is cool, which we'll talk a little bit more after, but it just made me think a bit about my own, Airbnb experiences, because, staying in a murder house is totally similar to an Airbnb.
100%.
And, I've had some funny ones. I went to one in Arkansas once where there's a hole in the wall. And their solution was, we're just gonna put a paper plate on the wall to cover the hole and just paint it the same color as the wall. No one's gonna know. We did, in fact, know. We could tell.
Spackle, who is she?
Yeah, what's actually fixing your property? And then one of the rooms was definitely a walk-in closet that they just put a bunk bed in. The top of the bunk, you could barely get in it. It was very strange. It was here. Yeah, it was actually way shorter than distance. And it was also angled. So you could get in at the front, but then you couldn't lay in the back of it.
So you were going to smack your head for sure.
Full show. You can fit your head. The bed that I was in, the frame was totally broken. It was really pretty old wood though. So it was cool. It was a really pretty area too. Downtown was pretty. It had some interesting memorials because it was in Arkansas. But aside, I recently stayed at an Airbnb here, which was really cute. I went with some of my friends.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was fun. But yeah, I just think it's interesting that this murder house that you could say.
Well, I feel like the closest thing that I've had to a murder house experience, I grew up going to living history farms all the time.
My parents got married too.
Seriously?
Oh my god! My parents got married in the church.
Dang. Remember when the Pope went to the church? We probably weren't alive, but he went to the church.
Yeah, remember the thing you were alive?
Yeah.
Oh
totally.
My God, really living it right now.
But no, I feel like the Flynn house and, I don't know, they're giving similar vibes, even though one house was a murder house and the other one wasn't.
I mean, I did tour it, and it definitely did have that living history farms feel to it, just because I went in, and it didn't really feel different from a normal house.
Okay.
It just felt old. That's an old house. That's a historical house.
Yeah.
Small.
Also,
France.
The Pope was there in 1979 on October 4th.
That was way before I was.
Yeah. Back in my day.
But
is it the Salisbury house?
Yes.
That's just a historical house? That's not a house.
No, that's just a historical house. I've been there. That was built right before the Great Depression. They spent a lot of money on it, and then they got screwed because the Great Depression happened, and they're like, oh no, we don't have any money anymore. So they tried to sell it, but they couldn't. So they sold it to the state.
And then there's a big house on living history.
Yeah, that's the Flint house. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the one closest to the Villisca house would be the 1900s farm, the one after the Pioneer farm. I don't know.
I haven't been to living history farm in a while. I miss her.
I love living history farms.
You. Bring back living history farm field trips.
You guys went on field trips there?
Yeah. I feel like I went on at least one.
No, that was always a summer activity.
Yeah, I'd go with my family a lot.
Yeah, no, my mom did in-home daycare, and we're yeah, that's what we're going to do with a whole bunch of kids, is the zoo, living history farms, and the science center.
You know what
And the pool.
We went a couple times on field trips, and I remember getting chased by a bunch of turkeys once, and like one of the workers had to like shoo them off with her dress.
I became like addicted to sarsaparilla there. Like, I love sarsaparilla so much, and I know that's really weird, but like, so good.
But do you like root beer?
I love root beer.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm a root beer lover, but I love sarsaparilla too, because I love black licorice.
See, I can't do the black licorice. That's why I can't do the sarsaparilla.
Love black licorice. Like, God, it's so good.
Can't do it. No.
I love black licorice.
No, I always went for the lemon drops.
Oh, those are so good too. I
Yes.
like the giant like gumdrops.
Yes.
And I like the black licorice.
And the rock candy.
The rock candy was cool. I got like a little like container, like a little knickknack
Okay.
thing. Like it was like a little box. It's like a little thing with flowers on top. I live in History Farm, so I still have it.
Yeah. I once during my prairie phase, that was an interesting phase for me. My sister and I got bonnets, like the little tie bonnets, and we're like, we are the coolest people ever.
Yes, you are.
I don't think we have them anymore, but I was like, I feel like Laura Ingalls Wilder, like huge Little House on the Prairie
I
phase.
love Little House on the Prairie.
Yes,
They need a movie, right?
TV show
TV
in the
show.
70s.
My mom loved it. I read the first book in one day and then did not read any of the others.
See, I had the picture books and I loved them.
I read those too. I also read like the books.
I listened to one of the books, but no, picture books.
I also saw the play at the Playhouse.
Yes, I saw the play at the Playhouse as well.
I've never seen it. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really have gift shop money when I went to Living History.
So fair.
Then when I started like having my own money, I bought myself a bookmark.
Oh,
But like
yeah.
past that, I'm gonna spend it.
No, we never went into gift shop. It's like, it's a lot of stuff.
We like bought like things, like we got to get like one thing at like the shops. It wasn't like the gift shop.
Yeah.
It was, like, the shops
Yeah.
Yeah, we would be able to like get one of those things for our birthday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because everything in there was like $1.25.
Like, I'm not like there's like the candy store.
Yeah.
And there's also like they like would sell like they do some like fans.
Oh,
stuff like
okay.
So you could get like something. It's just like
Yeah, no.
Could have bought some of those leeches.
No, I always saved up my quarters in the summer.
Easter egg.
Easter egg, bloodletting.
Start writing this down, guys.
They're talking about bloodletting at Living History Farms.
They do. That was an interesting little...
I was there for a funeral once.
Oh.
Like, they, like, faked a funeral.
Oh.
They faked, like, a historical funeral.
Oh my
It was really cool. Like, they had a whole funeral procession, and then they, like, put a fake, like, coffin into the ground, and then they, like, read something for them, and then, like, people, like, would, like, sprinkle dirt on, like, the coffin, and then they put flowers on it. It's really interesting.
Oh my gosh.
I feel like I'm not fake.
No, because I went to a 4th of July suffrage thing. I participated in a 4th of July women's suffrage event where I got to, like, women's right to vote sign.
Cool stuff.
Yeah. It was on the 4th of July, and then we saw a historical baseball game.
I was there too! I went to that. I was literally about to be like, I think I saw a baseball game.
Yes!
Oh my god.
Yeah, but that was also the time when I was like, I am never doing a spelling bee again, because we did a spelling bee and I misspelled dollar, and I was like, screw this, I'm out. I'm out. I love the
I
schoolhouse.
like the pie hunt.
Mm.
Really pro pie eater back then. I couldn't eat a whole pie now. I don't know what I was on.
Kids have that metabolism.
Anyway, we should probably be getting into that what we're actually here for today. Some Axe Murder House.
Villisca.
Woohoo. Imagine me losing Villisca.
Not you.
Guys, I tried so hard to say it. I could say it once. Anyway, let's get to it.
All right, so we're going to start with the timeline. So it starts on Sunday, June 9th of 1912, and we are featuring the Moore family, which consists of Josiah, his wife Sarah, their son Herman, who was 11, their daughter Catherine, who was 10, their other son Arthur, who was 7, and their other son Paul, who was 5.
Okay, other Paul.
Other Paul. Poor Paul. as well as two friends of Catherine, the Stillinger sisters, Ina May, who was 8, and Lena Gertrude, who was 12. So on the evening of Sunday the 9th, they attended a children's service at the local Presbyterian church, and the Stillinger sisters decided to stay the night. Shortly after midnight, the murderer attacked Josiah and Sarah. Both were bludgeoned to death with the blunt end of the axe. So that was a little bit surprising to me, because when I heard axe murder, I was like, oh, like, he hacked him with the axe. But no, he beat them with the axe, which is a little well, all of it's disturbing, but...
Was this axe, like, belonging to the house, or was it brought, do you know?
It belonged to Josiah.
Okay.
So it belonged to the house. Yeah.
Which also changed.
Which is, like... Yeah, spooky. So then the killer moved on to the Moore siblings, and similar to their parents, bludgeoned them with the blunt edge of the axe before moving on and killing the Stillinger sisters in the same way. The killer then went back upstairs, hitting Josiah an estimated 30 more times before rendering the rest of the Moore family unrecognizable through beatings. The killer then covered up all of the windows and mirrors. If the window didn't have, like, lines, he would take their clothing and, like, hang it over the window so no one could see in.
That's interesting, the, like, cover things.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's going into, like, this, like, brain of the serial killer.
Not necessarily.
But, like, I feel like those sort of things have meanings.
Yeah, there are some superstitious reasonings behind it. It was widely believed that if you were to look, specifically mirrors, if you were to look into a mirror after, like, or when there are dead people around after killing someone, that you'd be next. It also gets into kind of a religious type thing, just stealing or sin.
Yeah, like, I feel like it's, like, covering the sin, or, like, making sure that, if it's especially a mirror, like, you can't see yourself, so that you didn't actually do it. Like, I feel like it's similar to when, like, killers will make the body, like, in a way that it looks like they're lying in it.
Yeah.
Like, their arms crossed over each other.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like it's that, like, they're trying to hide from it.
Isn't there also something in the Bible that's like, you can't be convicted with only one witness? Like, there needs to be multiple people who witness it. So it's like, well, I'm not even one person who's seeing it.
I'm not even.
Yeah. So I can't be caught.
Yeah. So the mirror definitely does have that religious and superstitious aspect to it. The windows, probably just not to let people see.
Yeah.
I mean, you could also technically see your reflection in a window.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then we'll kind of get into this later, but the bodies weren't found until, like, 8 a.m. the next morning. By 7 a.m., their neighbor, Mary Peckman, became worried when she didn't see any movement in the house. They did live on a farm, and so the animals were growing restless. So she knocked on the doors and tried the doors and found them all locked. Peckman called Josiah's brother, Ross, and ended up getting a hold of him around 8:15. So Ross then came over and unlocked the doors and explored the house, ending up finding the Stillingers' deceased bodies in the bed that was made up for them. After finding the Stillinger sisters, Ross told Peckman to call the town marshal. And by 8:40, the news was out to the entire town, and the Moore home was swarmed with townspeople, upwards of 100 people coming in, just looking around the house and ultimately disrupting the evidence. Hank Horton was the town marshal and was not much help corralling people away from the scene. He even let some people hold the axe that was used to kill the victims.
Huh?
Yeah, because the killer, like, replaced the axe by the barn after he killed them. Because he stayed in the house for a little bit. Like, there was evidence that he, like, had a meal of beans and toast. And then there were also some people who were taking pieces of Josiah's skull as souvenirs. So just...
That's crazy.
Yeah. So around 9, the county coroner, Dr. Lindquist, arrived at the scene and was going over the evidence with Horton, and Sheriff Orrin Jackson was appalled by the amount of people who went through the scene and urged Sheriff Jackson to have the National Guard secure the scene. So by 10:30, the scene was secure. So that was still like 2 hours of people just going through, having fun.
I think that would help.
Yeah, no. Throwing their DNA everywhere. Fingerprints. Taking stuff. Oh, yeah. Taking pieces of the victims. Literally.
Well, who knows what?
Yeah, exactly. It was several hours before the house was entered by Lindquist and some of his associates that he ended up calling. And by 10 p.m., Lindquist was finally able to call the county attorney, Radcliffe, to get permission to release the bodies to the undertaker. So that's another 12 hours that the bodies were just sitting there. Like, I feel so bad for the Stillinger family because they had other siblings too. And it's like, oh, we can't even see our sisters who were brutally murdered. But the bodies, not all of the bodies wouldn't make it to the makeshift morgue that was made up in the fire station until nearly 2 a.m. So all of the deaths were ruled to be caused from severe head injuries. And while searching the scene, investigators found 2 cigarette butts found in the attic of the Moore household, leading to the theory that the murderer snuck into the home through either a window or an unlocked door when the Moores were at church and hid in the attic until they attacked between the hours of midnight and 2 a.m.
Do we also have evidence that the cigarette butts had to have belonged to the killer, though?
No.
Like, it really could have just been from what is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like over 100 people in the house, who knows they weren't taking a smoke break in the attic.
Exactly.
Also, like, why would you leave that there when you've done everything else? Like,
well, I mean, there wasn't much forensic evidence, like forensic testing back then. It was 1912. So, like,
when you see a cigarette butt now on a case,
it's like,
closed.
Exactly.
You can get DNA evidence off of that.
Back then, it was like, everyone smoked cigarettes.
But also,
you can't really.
If there's like evidence that they ate a meal, there's no evidence that they didn't also stay over, right?
Exactly.
Like they could have. So then they wouldn't have had to.
Yeah.
No?
And did they sneak in?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
So, in addition to the cigarette butts in the attic, investigators also found an oil lamp without its chimney, so like the little glass thing. And it was turned all the way down to have like a small flame to only like emit a small amount of light. And then they also found a keychain that did not belong to the Moores. But again, kind of with the cigarette butt thing, did the keychain come from the murderer or did it come from one of the 100 people who were trapezing through the house?
Yeah.
There were quite a few suspects for this case.
There are. So, there were actually several suspects that emerged almost immediately, including someone named William Mansfield and a man named Reverend Kelly. And then I will also just go and yap about a possible serial killer. So there was no one that was actually ever convicted for the Axe Murders. And there were also just like a lot of people that, for example, that even just went into the home afterwards. So there's really no idea people that it could have been.
Well, and Cadence and I were talking about this, and Cadence brought up a really interesting point. Who's to say that the murderer didn't come back and just put DNA back into the home? And, well, everyone was there, so why not?
I'm going to talk about the first person, William Mansfield, who was arrested in 1960. So Josiah Moore, the father, worked for Frank Jones at the Jones store for many years until he opened his own company in 1908, if you want like a little year for that. And Frank Jones was, according to the residents, extremely upset that Moore left his employ to take on his own business. And from what I found, there's also a rumor that Josiah Moore had an affair with Jones' daughter-in-law, which kind of is like, oh my god.
Scandalous.
Detective Wilkerson of the Burns Detective Agency openly accused Frank Jones and his son, Albert, of hiring William Mansfield to kill Josiah Moore because he didn't like him. Neither Jones nor his son was ever arrested, though, and both denied this fact or any connection to the murders. But the potential hitman, Mansfield, was arrested in 1916 because Detective Wilkerson believed he was responsible for the axe murders of his wife, child, father-in-law, and mother-in-law in Blue Island, Illinois, 2 years after the Villisca crime. So he also thought that Mansfield was the killer in another axe murder in Kansas 4 days before the Villisca massacre. And there's lots of similarities, which we will also talk about in another minute. And then there's another one in Aurora, Colorado, that he pinned on Mansfield as well. And since all these murders were very, very similar, Wilkerson, like a lot of others, assumed that these were probably all done by the same person. And in this case, he believed that it was Mansfield. Especially the specific part of it was that the murders were done in a way where the person, like the victims, were hacked to death with the blunt end of an axe, and the mirrors were covered with cloths. And also, in another one of the murders, a lamp with a chimney off was left at like each of these scenes, similar to the Villisca murders. And so then Mansfield was arrested and brought to Montgomery County from Kansas City, but he had a solid alibi that placed Mansfield in Illinois at the time of the Paola, Kansas, and Villisca murders. So he was released for lack of evidence, and then he also Mansfield won a lawsuit against Wilkerson for, like, him claiming that he did all this stuff. So I was like, that's a pretty interesting suspect.
Yeah. Especially, like, the hitman aspect of it, too. It's like,
that's, like, a really interesting theory.
Yeah.
I feel like a hitman would come more prepared, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah.
You see they're using the axe from the Moore home.
Mm.
I mean, I guess a trained person could do their job with anything, but I feel like a hitman would have a set way, not too messy.
Would have their own axe.
Like, I also
Or
think
even an axe.
I feel like hitmen, like, they're not normal murders. Like,
Oh, yeah.
job. But this seems like very personal, especially with, like, even if the cases, like, are connected with, it's the blunt end of the axe and, like, the covering of the mirrors. Like, that's something very, very specific.
Yeah.
And I feel like a hitman would have really easy.
Yeah.
And he went back. Like, he killed everyone, then went back and continued to bludgeon them until they were unrecognized.
Yeah.
So that's, like, personal.
Well, and I feel like the other thing, too, is, like, when you think of, like, axe, at least when I think of axe murders, I'm like, oh, they were decapitated by an axe. So it just feels very messy to do the whole thing, especially, like, 8 people to bludgeon them all with the blunt end of an axe.
All right. Well, moving on to our second suspect, which is very interesting. The Reverend George Kelly, who was arrested in 1970. Reverend George Kelly was a traveling preacher who was born in England, but then him and his wife settled in Macedonia. He settled in Iowa in 1912 after several years of preaching around the Midwest. In 1917, he was arrested and charged with the murder of one of the victims of the Villisca Axe Murders. Kelly was about to enter a Presbyterian seminary, and he was doing work for the Presbyterian Church in Villisca. He attended a program there on June 9th of 1912, and so his presence in Villisca on the night of the murders and then his departure in the early morning hours of then the following June 10th made him very, very suspicious to a lot of different people. It also didn't help that he wrote very lengthy letters to investigators and pretended to be an investigator for Scotland Yard to get inside the house after the murders.
Ooh.
And then he also sent a bloody shirt to a drugstore for cleaning the following week.
Oh.
Many researchers on the Villisca murder case have, like, deep dived on Reverend Kelly. And while he was a very smart man, he did suffer from a lot of mental issues and was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And he, according to one of my sources, says he had a penchant for peeping in windows and was known as a firebug and confessed to a series of arson crimes.
Ooh.
So, like, bro was a little bit of an arsonist. Investigators failed to arrest him initially for a simple reason. He was a very small man. He was only 5'2" and roughly 120 pounds. So the investigators believe he wasn't physically capable of the crimes. And then by the time he was arrested, 5 years had passed since the murders, and witnesses then had difficulty remembering details. So with that, the combination of a coerced confession and a lack of physical evidence left, according to our source, one jury hung and a second ended in mistrial. Kelly eventually then left the Midwest and settled in New England, and his behavior became increasingly erratic, and he just kind of kept going more crazy and died in 1959 at the age of 80 in a psychiatric hospital. But I think there's a little bit more to do.
Yeah, so with Reverend Kelly, that brings back the whole covering the mirrors and windows thing. We talked about the more religious aspect of that in different ways that would fit with a reverend, obviously. Another thing that goes with his part of being a preacher, it was well known at this time that if someone from the clergy or some religious figurehead came and asked for a place to stay, you said yes. And as a traveling preacher, Reverend Kelly would probably be looking for a place to stay. In the Moore house, found downstairs was another bed made up that hadn't been slept in. And they had over the Stillinger girls, and they had 4 kids, but they all had a place to sleep. They were all sleeping in their beds when they were killed, and they were still in their beds. Like their corpses were still in the beds. So there was this extra bed made up. Why would there be an extra bed?
Yeah.
Guest rooms weren't really a thing back in 1912, and this house was teeny tiny.
Well, yeah, and the other thing, too, is the Stillinger sisters, they were set up in Sarah's sewing room. Like, they weren't in a guest room either. They were set up in a sewing room downstairs.
And this extra bed was also not in, like, a bedroom. It wasn't a guest room specifically, but it was an extra bed that had been made up. So there is a theory that Reverend Kelly was going to be staying there, which would mean that he would not need to break in, get through those locked doors, windows, anything, to be able to have access to the house.
But I feel like there's not, like, connection towards him and the other murders, but I feel like there is connections between the murders of some of us. Yeah. But, I mean, he is also, like, a pretty good suspect for, like, being crazy and trying to get onto the crime scene.
Yeah.
Did also know about the crime before anyone else had, like, gone into the house.
Interesting.
I believe there was an account of him, like, going either to a train station or somewhere else, but just, like, talking about it at, like, 8 a.m, which was before the bodies had been discovered.
Yeah.
But this could go back to him being a peeping Tom.
True. But the windows were covered.
The windows were covered, but if they were covered with clothing, how well would that cover the entire window?
It's true.
Also, if we go crazy, we could say there's both him and the serial killer. So he was supposed to stay there, and then he, for some reason, wasn't there for a moment, or he was there and the killer didn't kill him. Possibly, like, because he was a member of the clergy and he was obsessed with, like, sin, and that's why he covered the mirrors. I wonder if that could be something, and that's why he, like, went crazy.
The bed also was not slept in, though. So maybe they just had it made up just in case. Maybe, some of the kids needed somewhere else to stay. It's just theories.
But, like, could they have made the bed afterwards? Like, could he have, like, been in and then made it before he left? I don't know. Maybe he's thinking too much of that. Maybe I'm reading too much into it.
But yeah, also with the peeping Tom part, he could have just walked in. Well, no, it was locked.
It was locked.
It was locked.
Yeah.
Never mind. He would have had to look through the window.
Yeah.
Well,
yes. There are a few other suspects. There's a man named Henry Lee Moore, who could be part of the string of serial killings that happened. I won't go too much into him, though. And then someone named Andy Sawyer, who was detained by sheriff on June 18th, 1912. And then a man named Joe Ricks, detained in Illinois, June 15th, 1912. And this leads into the question of, was there a serial killer? So there are a few researchers today who believe that a serial killer traveling by train is a very plausible explanation for the murder in Villisca and also the surrounding areas that I talked about earlier. Because although they are seemingly random axe murders, there's striking similarities between them, especially using the blunt side of an axe. In my humble opinion. Most of the researchers do rule out the man Henry Moore as a suspect, even though there were a lot of people who believe that he was connected. Because robbery wasn't a motive, because nothing I think was really counted as being like stolen or was gone.
No, because Josiah still had his wallet with all of his money in it when his body was found.
But some signatures of the other crimes are missing, such as the covering of victims' faces. Because in the Villisca Axe Murders, only the windows and mirrors were covered, the faces weren't actually covered. But a theory could be that someone messed with the bodies between, like, the time they were found, so they were originally covered. Or it could be, like, a copycat killer who heard about the other ones and just, like, did what they read about or something. I don't know. A publication of the other murders in that time that well. But, like, that's something that I've seen that happens before.
Criminal Minds.
Criminal Minds, guys. And we'll link the website, but there's a lot of different books, especially recent ones with different researchers who just tie things into possible suspects of what they would be like if it was a serial killer in these areas. So you guys can go check that out if you want. The cases that are usually connected to the Villisca murders is one in Colorado Springs in 1912, where 4 members of the Burnham family were found murdered with an axe at their home. And then another one is the Monmouth Axe Murders in 1911, where a man, William Dawson, and his wife Charity, their 13-year-old daughter Georgia, were bludgeoned to death with a heavy pipe in their bed while they slept, which this one had a lot of similarities specifically to the Villisca scene and not just with, like, the axe. And then one in Paola, Kansas, I think is how you say it, in 1912, which this is the one that was just 6 days before the Villisca murder. Roland Hudson and his wife were found murdered in their beds, killed by an axe. And in this one, their faces were covered, and just like the Villisca scene, the murder weapon was left at the scene, and the window shades were drawn and the doors were locked. And then there's the Axemen of New Orleans in 1918 to 1919, which was a series of very, very brutal axe murders occurring in New Orleans, which was attributed to an unidentified assailant who, like, still is not known today. Yeah, very cool, very interesting, very fun.
So, Cadence, you said you've been to the Villisca house. Tell us about it.
I did not stay the night. You can do that, but it's very expensive and doesn't seem very fun. Well, I mean, it'd be fun. It's just, it seems really scary and spooky, and I'm not into that when it comes to my well-being. They have, like, this poster, because there's a specific, it's not the house, but it's like a gift shop type thing. They have all the gift shops where you pay for the tours, and they have a board, like a bulletin board up with pictures of, like, people having injuries after staying the night there.
Oh, so it's like haunted.
Yeah, it's haunted.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big part that hasn't been talked about yet, but there is a lot of paranormal stuff happening in there. People will leave offerings for the children specifically, like coins. You're not allowed to leave candy.
Why?
I think it's the bugs.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah. They don't want to, like, take it away, but also, like, bugs. They have a set of rules on that bulletin board. And I know it's, like, no candy, no provoking the spirits, all that stuff.
How would you even provoke a spirit?
Calling it names? I don't know.
Oh.
How would you provoke a living person?
Like, stupid Josiah, you shouldn't have slept with that guy's sister-in-law.
Well, isn't it the children who haunt? Or does Josiah, do the parents haunt as well?
I think it's mostly the children.
It probably is because it's like they didn't get to live their life or whatever.
That's, like, really sad.
But they're like, people will roll balls and they'll come back. It's like the kids are playing with it. So they leave little toys and offerings and stuff. Mostly in the parents' bedroom, they have, like, a dresser thing that there's a bunch of offerings on top of. But yeah, it's obviously a historical house. Feels pretty normal, at least when I walked in and did my tour. The tours were pretty rushed. It is a big tourist attraction.
Mm.
We were in there it was me and my mom. And then we were in there with a couple who like to go to different spooky attractions, true crime and paranormal. And there was a family, like 2 parents and 2 kids that were not, like, little kids, but, like, preteens. And they were really annoying because they're preteens and just being obnoxious. So I'm trying to learn. I really liked the tour guide, though. She had a lot of knowledge, like, historically and also, like, religiously.
Oh.
So she talked about a lot of that in the tour. And after I went to the gift shop and I bought one of the books that was there. So I read A Nightmare in Villisca. You can get it on Amazon. It's like $17. But it was pretty good. Runs through the whole situation. Pretty good summary of that. Yeah, I have a couple pictures. I believe they're going to be on the Instagram.
Yep.
Just of what the inside of the house looks like, the vibes felt pretty normal, but knowing that a heinous axe crime was committed in there is a little interesting feeling.
Did it feel spooky? Like, did it feel haunted?
It might have just been the time that I was in there. You get a lot of more of the haunting stuff when you stay overnight.
Okay.
We were there in the middle of the day on like a Thursday.
Or do you stay in the beds they were murdered in?
I don't think so. I think you just stay in like the downstairs area on like sleeping bags.
Oh, okay. So like that would also be very creepy.
Yeah, I don't know if that might be one of the rules is like to not lay in the beds.
Okay.
And obviously some of the stuff's probably been restored just to give it like accuracy, but not also have like the blood-soaked mattresses and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure everything was replaced. Yeah. Items have probably been stolen and they've replaced that. There's a basket of like letters and people talking about their experiences in the sewing room. It's an interesting experience for sure.
Yeah.
Tours are only like $15.
Oh.
They only take cash. So if you're ever in Villisca.
Interesting.
I know that's what me and my mom went on a road trip and went there. So the house has actually moved locations.
What?
Like, it's not in the original location. They like moved the whole house, I'm pretty sure.
Oh. Well, I think they did that at the Flint House too.
Yeah.
So no, not the Flint House. The other places that Living History. Like the little town.
It's cool.
Yeah. Spooky.
After Halloween, though.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening. Join us next week where we talk about the Empress of Ireland shipwreck.
Ooh, exciting.
Bye. Bye. Thank you for joining us today. As always, all sources will be listed in the show notes below.
Be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out on our upcoming discussions. Join us next week as we delve into the intriguing depths of our grim past.
Stay curious. There's so much more to uncover.